A wedding is one day. The payment can last much longer. Imagine two founders merging their startups. They have $30,000 in operating capital. If they spend $25,000 on an office launch party and leave $5,000 for product development, investors would call them completely incompetent. Yet, when couples do this, society calls it a magical milestone. We are going to look at the brutal math behind the modern wedding industry. We will compare three real budgets with no shame and make the financial trade-offs completely visible. Because right now, the average American believes they are simply funding a relational milestone. In reality, they are walking into a highly optimized consumer trap designed to extract their earliest and most potent investing capital. To optimize your wealth, you have to view marriage fundamentally as a financial merger between two entities. When two companies merge, they do not liquidate their combined operating capital to throw a party. Doing so would instantly damage the balance sheet when it needs stability most. Yet every day, rational people make mathematically destructive choices, all in the name of love. Before we break down the exact dollar figures of three modern couples, I want to invite you to join the channel. If you are someone who likes looking at the logic behind the numbers and wants to make wealth building a predictable science rather than an emotional guessing game, hitting the subscribe button is the best return on investment for your time today. Our goal here is never to judge how you spend your money. Our goal is to make the trade-offs visible so you can make decisions based on math, not on marketing. The standard advice you hear everywhere is that a wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime investment in memories. Conventional wisdom dictates that spending a year of average salary, which historically hovers around $20,000 to $35,000, is completely justified because you simply cannot put a price tag on your special day. There is also a secondary myth floating around that couples will just make the money back in cash gifts, or that going into a little bit of debt is just a standard, unavoidable rite of passage. This belief system is not inherent to human nature. It is a highly effective, manufactured psychological anchor. You are told from a young age that the size of the celebration correlates directly to the significance of the commitment. The prevailing societal narrative posits that going big is the only way to validate the relationship in the eyes of your peers. But if we dig into the history of consumerism, we realize this is a relatively new phenomenon. It was designed by marketers to extract capital from young couples at the exact moment they are most susceptible to emotional manipulation. We are conditioned to believe frugality on this day is a sign of financial instability or a lack of romantic dedication. This creates an environment where couples feel immense pressure to stretch their finances to the absolute breaking point. They convince themselves that they are investing in memories, completely ignoring the fact that those memories will eventually be overshadowed by the stress of the debt payments required to fund them. If we rewind to the 1930s, we see the birth of the De Beers effect. The normalization of spending 2 months' salary on a diamond engagement ring laid the groundwork for a very specific cultural shift. It successfully equated financial sacrifice with romantic commitment. If it did not hurt your wallet, you must not really love them. That was the subtle message implanted into the culture, and it worked beautifully. Fast forward to today, and we have what can only be described as a $70 billion wedding industrial complex. This massive industry relies heavily on something behavioral economists call the affect heuristic. This is a mental shortcut where people make decisions based on their current emotions rather than objective data. The wedding industry is built on making couples feel that suppressing their budget is the exact equivalent of suppressing their love. If you opt for the cheaper floral arrangement, you are somehow cheapening the relationship itself. It is a brilliant piece of marketing that completely bypasses the logical brain. The sheer scale of the wedding industrial complex is staggering. It is an ecosystem composed of venues, planners, florists, caterers, and media companies, all working in tandem to establish a baseline of expected luxury. They control the magazines, the blogs, and the reality shows. They dictate what a normal wedding looks like. And because most couples have never planned a massive event before, they look to this industry to tell them what they need. When the industry says you need customized invitations, a professional lighting crew, and a tiered cake, the couple assumes these are mandatory components of getting married. The effect heuristic kicks into high gear during the planning process. Every time you try to cut a line item, the industry gently reminds you that this is the most important day of your life. They ask you if you really want to compromise on your special day. And because you are emotionally compromised, you cave. You accept the higher price because fighting the industry feels like you are fighting the significance of your own marriage. Then we have the Instagram and Pinterest baseline. In the past 10 years, social media has artificially inflated the baseline of what constitutes a normal wedding. We are talking about floral arches, custom ambient lighting, drone photography, and artisan donut walls. These items used to be Veblen goods, which are luxury items used strictly as status symbols by the ultra-wealthy. But the visual standardization of luxury on social media has shifted these items from luxury upgrades to perceived standard necessities. The danger here is profound. The average person believes they need these things because they are conflating a massive consumer event with a simple relational milestone. Getting legally and relationally committed requires a license, an officiant, and perhaps a nice dinner with your closest family. Everything else is a consumer purchase. And to optimize our wealth, we must strictly separate the two. It is time to run the hard numbers and see what this conflation actually costs us over a long-term timeline. If you think spending $30,000 is just a one-time hit to your savings, wait until you see what happens when we calculate the opportunity cost at age 58. Most people stop right here, pay the non-refundable venue deposit, and quietly lose $500,000 of future net worth. Let us look at the brutal math. We are going to look at 3 different budgets utilising projected variables for a 30-year time horizon spanning from age 28 to age 58. We will assume an S&P 500 expected real return of 7.5%, which is adjusted for inflation. We will also use a current unsecured credit card annual percentage rate of 21.5% and a high-yield savings rate of 4.5%. We are stripping away the emotion and looking purely at capital allocation. Let us start with Budget A, which I call the financed fantasy. The setup here is incredibly common. The couple wants a $35,000 wedding. They pay $15,000 from their depleted savings and finance the remaining $20,000 on credit cards and personal loans. The cash flow drag on Budget A is immediate and severe. To pay off $20,000 at 21.5% interest over 5 years requires a mandatory monthly payment of $545. The total cost of that debt ends up being over $32,000, with more than $12,000 going toward pure interest. But that is just the visible cost. The brutal math lies in the opportunity cost. If that couple had taken their initial $15,000 in cash, plus that $545 monthly payment, and invested it in the market for those 5 years, and then let it compound for 25 more years at 7.5%, the net worth impact at year 30 is a massive negative $421,000. Now let us look at Budget B, the $20,000 compromise. In this setup, the couple is a bit more financially conservative. They pay entirely in cash, zeroing out their emergency fund and draining their early investment accounts to cover a $20,000 event. There is no shame here and zero debt. This is just standard expected spending. The cash flow drag here is not directly from debt servicing, but rather the loss of liquidity yield. They lose the safety net. They must now aggressively save just to rebuild their emergency fund, which effectively delays their housing down payment or early investing goals by 18 to 24 months. The opportunity cost is simply that $20,000 invested at a 7.5% real return for 30 years. Without adding another dime, that money would have grown substantially. The net worth impact for Budget B at year 30 is negative $175,099, a massive loss of potential wealth for a single evening. Finally, we have Budget C, the asymmetric optimizer. The setup is a highly curated micro-wedding, an elopement, or a premium dinner party reception. This couple also had $20,000 in cash. They spend $5,000 on the wedding itself. But here is the critical move. They immediately deploy the remaining $15,000 into a broad market index fund. The opportunity cost here is negligible. They successfully captured the relational milestone while preserving their liquidity. The net worth impact at year 30 for Budget C is positive $131,324. That is the future value of the preserved capital. The mathematical conclusion is staggering. The difference between Budget A and Budget C is not $30,000. When you factor in the time value of money, compound interest, and debt servicing, the actual delta in their net worth at age 58 is over $550,000. The traditional wedding is a massive, unrecoverable capital expenditure at the exact moment when compound interest is most mathematically potent. This is the point where conventional wisdom says you just need to set a firm budget and stick to it using willpower. Most people stop here and assume they are safe. I'm going to tell you that relying on willpower is a $50,000 mistake, because vendors know exactly how to bypass your logic. If you do not understand the psychology of the industry, you will fail even if you know the math. It starts with perfect price discrimination, commonly known as the wedding tax. If you call a caterer and ask for a quote for a family reunion, the price is $2,000. If you call that exact same caterer and ask for a quote for a wedding, the price is mysteriously $6,000. Consumers accept this absurd markup because they are completely blinded by the affect heuristic. Their emotions override their logical valuation skills. They assume the higher price means better quality for their special day, when in reality they are just paying a premium for the word wedding. The second psychological trap is mimetic desire, based on René Girard's theory. We do not intrinsically desire an artisan donut wall, a customized neon sign, or a $4,000 cinematic videographer. According to Girardian theory, our desires are highly mimetic. We simply want what we see other people wanting. The wedding industry weaponizes this mimetic desire to make couples compete in an invisible status game that has absolutely zero financial upside. You scroll through social media and see hundreds of curated moments, and your brain begins to adopt those external desires as your own internal baseline. Suddenly, a basic hall with simple catering feels inadequate, not because it actually is, but because it fails to meet the mimetic standard set by your peers and algorithms. You are no longer paying for an experience. You are paying to not feel left behind in a status game you did not even know you were playing. You are bleeding capital just to keep up appearances. The third trap is the sunk cost fallacy and the escalation of commitment. Wedding planning typically takes 12 to 18 months. Couples always start with a strict $15,000 budget. But once they pay a non-refundable $5,000 deposit for the venue, they fall right into the escalation of commitment. The brain rationalizes the spending. It says, we already spent $5,000 on the beautiful room. It would be a total waste if the chairs look cheap. The budget quietly creeps to $25,000 through a series of $1,000 micro decisions. Every time a vendor presents an upgrade, the couple views it through the lens of the money they have already spent. They feel committed to a certain level of luxury, and abandoning that aesthetic feels like a waste of the initial deposit. This escalation is entirely predictable, and the wedding industry relies on it to double their revenue per client. This brings us to the hidden penalty, the marital solvency risk. The most glaring omission in wedding planning is marital longevity data. Financial stress is consistently ranked as the number 1 or number 2 cause of divorce in the United States. By starting a marriage with a liquidity crisis like Budget B, or high interest debt like Budget A, couples are statistically increasing the probability that the marriage itself will fail. They are financing the celebration of a legal contract while simultaneously undermining the foundation of that exact contract. It is a profound irony. Couples spend thousands of dollars to celebrate a union, but the financial strain of that celebration becomes the very wedge that drives them apart. If you truly value the relationship, the most romantic thing you can do is protect the balance sheet of the new entity you are creating. Financial solvency is the bedrock of marital longevity. Optimization requires a total shift in strategy. You have to decouple the legal milestone from the consumer event. Do not rely on willpower, because willpower fatigues. You must rely on rigid frameworks. And before we dive into the exact ratios to use, I need to show you the bridge between learning this math and actually executing it. That is where Cash Class comes in. Cash Class is the official Tom Talks Money web application designed for optimizers like you. I built Cash Class with a strict privacy-first angle. There are absolutely no bank logins required. You never have to link your private accounts. You simply upload your CSV statement directly from your bank, and the web app categorizes and tracks your cash flow against the exact frameworks we talk about on this channel. It relies purely on manual CSV uploads, keeping your credentials completely off the grid. You also get our free Budgeting 101 course built directly into the platform. You can click the link at the very top of the description below to start your 14-day free trial on the web. It is the best way to turn these theories into actual net worth. Now, let us look at the first rigid framework. I call this the wedding to wealth ratio, or WWR. You must never let the wedding budget exceed a strict mathematical threshold of your combined financial baseline. The rule is simple. Your total wedding spend cannot exceed 3% of your combined net worth, or 8% of your combined gross annual income, whichever number is lower. Let us look at the application. If a couple makes $120,000 combined, their 8% gross income cap is $9,600. If their combined net worth is $50,000, their 3% cap is $1,500. Because you must choose the lower number, their maximum allowable spend is $1,500. Any single dollar spent above this threshold must be flagged as a critical capital misallocation. This framework forces you to get creative, to look at elopements, public parks, or private dinners, rather than mindlessly signing venue contracts. This is where conventional wisdom says to compromise on everything. I am going to tell you to be ruthless instead. But first, we need to fix a major leak in how we calculate costs. Because money roughly doubles every 10 years in the stock market, assuming a 7.2% return based on the rule of 72, couples must evaluate every single vendor quote in future value. I call this the rule of 2, or the T-10 opportunity cost. The rule states you must multiply every wedding expense by 2 for a 10-year horizon, or by 8 for a 30-year horizon. When you look at a $3,000 floral package, you have to realize it does not cost $3,000. It costs your 38-year-old self $6,000, and your 58-year-old self $24,000. You have to look at the florist and ask yourself, is this arrangement worth $24,000 of my retirement portfolio? When you frame it in future value, walking away from the premium option becomes incredibly easy. Framework 3 is the 100/0 binary allocation strategy. Traditional wedding advice tells you to compromise on everything. Get the slightly cheaper chicken, the slightly cheaper DJ, the slightly cheaper photographer. The optimizer's math says something completely different. Cut ruthlessly to absolute zero on the things you do not deeply care about, and spend 100% of your allocated budget on the one or two things you do. If you only care about amazing food and capturing the memories, take your strict limit and spend it entirely on a Michelin star private dining room and a world-class photographer. Spend exactly $0 on a DJ. Spend $0 on centerpieces. Spend $0 on a massive venue space. By cutting the fluff to zero, you avoid the $1,000 micro decisions that drag average couples into debt. You get a premium experience in the areas you actually value, and you keep your capital securely invested where it belongs. To really lock this mindset in, we need to look at how we view our capital. Capital in your 20s and 30s is your seed corn. It has the highest compounding potential of your entire life. Spending $20,000 on a wedding is literally taking a match to your seed corn just to have a bonfire. You get warm for one night, but you starve a decade later due to sequence of returns risk. Another way to look at it is the hose and the pool. Many high earners justify a $40,000 wedding because they have a big hose, meaning high annual salaries. But wealth is not the water flowing out of the hose. Wealth is the water accumulating in the pool. A wedding is a massive leak in the pool, right at the exact moment you start trying to fill it up. If you want to surround yourself with people who think this way, I highly recommend clicking the join button below the video to become one of the optimizers. Channel members get custom sketch badges next to their names in the comments, and priority replies on financial questions. The decision of how to start your marriage sets the financial tone for the next 30 years. You can choose to start married and fully funded, or you can choose to start broke and stressed. Avoiding the loyalty tax is about refusing to play a rigged game. You can arbitrate the market by utilizing non-traditional spaces where the wedding tax algorithm has not been programmed into the pricing. The math heavily favors the optimizers. Now, I want to turn this over for some peer review. Jump into the comments and let me know your thoughts on the wedding to wealth ratio. Have you seen someone fall into the sunk cost trap? Or have you successfully pulled off an asymmetric micro wedding? Drop your data points below so we can all learn from them. Keep optimizing, keep looking at the brutal math, and I will see you in the next breakdown.